One of my favorite Sundays of the year is almost here, Celebration Sunday. What's Celebration Sunday? Celebration Sunday is a Sunday where we tell stories, good stories of what God has been up to in and through our community over the last 12 months. So mark your calendar for Sunday, June the 3rd at both services, and one added bonus, we're going to have a big barbecue together afterwards. But one more thing, if you were wondering if there would be a good Sunday to invite someone new to Lakeview, this would be it. So plan to be a part of things and bring a friend. If you are just joining us this morning, we have been in a long series in the book of Hebrews. We're at the tail end of it now. The series is titled Risk Being Known. And the last few weeks in particular, we've been talking about faith. We've been talking about faith being in the sense of that you're holding out for something better, for God's better, and you're not just settling. And sometimes, like we talked about last week, faith gets us being all weird because it moves you to do things and to say things and to think things that are strange, that don't always make rational sense in this world. And last week, as we finished up chapter 11 of Hebrews, it was examples of people who lived out that weird faith. And this morning, we continue along those lines in chapter 12. We're going to talk about faith in terms of focus. We're going to talk about faith in terms of endurance and how the payoff at the end of it all is going to make everything right. So Hebrews chapter 12 begins like this. Do you see what this all means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on. It means we'd better get on with it. Strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat, no parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. That exhilarating finish in and with God, he could put up with anything along the way. Cross, shame, whatever. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. When you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item, that long litany of hostility he plowed through. That will shoot adrenaline into your souls. So far in the book of Hebrews, there's been a long discussion, a long description of what the Christian life truly is, with all its ups and all its downs, its heroes and heroines, and now we get one last push. And the author says, I've got one more working metaphor for you, and here it is. Think of it like this. The Christian life is like a race, but it's not about speed, it's actually about endurance. And the competition isn't the other runners. Oh, the competition is actually internal with myself. And the prize is a person. So the author is using language and understanding and imagery that his audience would have already had at the time of what the race world looked like in their world. And then he twists it just a little to give them and I a little bit of a better understanding in saying that this race, when you think of the Christian life in this way, it's going to actually help you sink your faith roots deep in your everyday life. So he sets up this backdrop. He says this, imagine that you are in a filled stadium. It is packed to the rafters and everybody is cheering. They're cheering your name, Ryan, Ryan. And they're doing this Arsenio Hall thing in the air, Ryan, Ryan. You don't even know who Arsenio Hall is, do you? That's way too long ago. You guys don't know. Check him out on YouTube. Actually don't. Not worth it. So they're cheering your name. And the stands is filled with saints, people who have gone before us, encouraging you to keep going. You've got this. You're almost there. And the author says, look down the track. Look all the way down to the finish line. What do you see? You see, in that world, in the ancient world, when there were big contests, big races, the royal would be at the end of the race. He's got the best seat in the house. He's going to watch it. But then to his right was a seat, and the seat was called the seat of honor. And you know who sat in that seat? The past champ. The one who had already run the race and won it. So the writer is creating this picture for you and I, and he's saying this. He's saying, look down the track. Do you see who's in the seat of honor? It's Jesus, the one who already ran and won this race. So he's saying, let Jesus be your inspiration. Let Jesus be your prize. And then he goes on to say, as you're running, all that stuff that is weighing you down, that stuff that will slow you down and wear you out and tire you out prematurely, shed that extra weight. Take it off. Take off everything that will restrict your movement and impede your performance. There's a neat note here, actually, that the word for extra weight here in the original Greek is most often tied to the idea of pride, which I think is a really neat connection. So then hear this picture, this metaphor in its context then. The writer is saying, are you focused on Jesus? If so, shed your pride. Take off every part of you that is just way too cool for school, that stuff that's weighing you down. Take it off, every last little bit of pride that is worried about how you are perceived. That pride that says, what's my social standing like these days? What am I accomplishing? What am I gaining? That sticky pride, it gets all over you, and it fools you into believing that your life is only about you and what you can do. And truthfully, my friends, is there any heavier weight than that? To feel like your life is only a performance, and you're only as good as your last game. And you have to prove your worth every single day. You got to show results to let other people know that you're actually valuable. And if you're unable to do that, then you're quickly cut so the next person can take your spot. But for the Christian, that is not what drives us. Daniel Berrigan says, our task is not to be popular or to be seen as having an impact, but to speak the deepest truths that we know. We need to live our lives in accord with the deepest truths we know, even if doing so does not produce immediate results in this world. So maybe that's why the author of Hebrews is saying, keep your focus on Jesus. Because when I'm in full pride mode, I'm looking around to see what others have and make note of what I don't have. When I'm in full pride mode, I'm constantly trying to impress people. That makes me distracted from the ultimate prize. It makes me forget who I am, the race that I'm in, and that my job as a human isn't to produce results, but to live truthfully. Because if my focus is Jesus, for example, then, it doesn't matter what kind of car I drive. Do you know what matters? If I know someone who needs a ride to get to where they need to be. If my focus is on Jesus, then I don't care who has it better than me. What I actually care about are those people who don't have it as good as me. If my focus is on Jesus, then as a parent, my primary job isn't to get my kids farther ahead in life. No, my main job is to have these little ones at the core of their being own the deepest truths that we know and allow those truths to shape and to direct their lives. So then if I focus on Jesus, it defines how I see myself. It defines how I interact with my surroundings. But if I'm distracted in this race, if pride becomes my primary motivator, then it's the opinions of others that end up counting the most to me and that shape my life and my direction and how I spend myself. So time out. Hebrews is throwing us a fastball right now, a hard question to deal with, and it's this. What are you looking at? Where is your focus? Is it on the champ, the one who's already run and won the race? Or are you being distracted by something else? If you are, what is distracting you from the deepest truths that you know? Because if that's where you find yourself today, this next question is for you. Whose opinion matters most to you? Whose voice? Whose view? Whose take on you? And do you recognize that it's that opinion that is shaping you, that is driving you? And it's through that little crack that pride slinks in and sneaks up on us. Now, for sure, we got our work cut out for us. It's worth it. But it's going to be a fight. In this all-out match against sin, others have suffered far worse than you, to say nothing of what Jesus went through, all that bloodshed. So don't feel sorry for yourselves. Or have you forgotten how good parents treat children and that God regards you as His children? And then he quotes from Proverbs, "Dear child, don't shrug off God's discipline, but don't be crushed by it either. It's the child He loves that He disciplines. The child He embraces, He also corrects. God is educating you. That's why you must never drop out. He's treating you as dear children. This trouble you're in isn't punishment, it's training. The normal experience of children. Only irresponsible parents leave children to fend for themselves. Would you prefer an irresponsible God? We respect our own parents for training and not spoiling us. So why not embrace God's training so that we can truly live? Now, in your Bible, it might interpret this passage and use that word discipline over and over again. And we can often associate that word discipline with punishment. But I like this translation a bit better because it's carrying on that rhythm, that theme, that vibe of training, of athletics. So then trouble isn't punishment. Trouble is training. And like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, God doesn't send trouble down from on high. I'm going to give you this problem. I'm going to give you this fear. I'm going to make sure this messes up in your life. That's not part of God's plan. God's plan is to help you deal with trouble that hits you. And why is there trouble in this world? Because the world is fractured. It's broken. It's off the rails. So Hebrews is saying, when you run into trouble, let that be a reminder to you to stay focused, to stay training, to keep your eye on that finish line. In the trouble you're in, remember it as an education, a coaching, a regiment, a diet. So run the drills, Hebrews says. Watch the Jesus game tapes. See how He did it. Correct your swing. Do your reps. And again, the author's making a super neat connection here because he's mixing metaphors. Because in the time that he was writing, there was a school set up for little kids, and the goal of the school was this. When they got out of the program, they would come out the other end as respectable citizens of their society. So the writer of Hebrews is pulling these two metaphors together and saying this. He's saying, when you go through your drills, through your practices, through your disciplines, the goal, at the end of it all, is for you to become a responsible member of the Christian family. But yeah, is training nice? Usually not. Watching your diet, getting up early, doing those kinds of things? No, not great. It hurts. But we also know that perseverance and endurance has to be part of that training. Let's see if I can explain it this way. Let me tell you a little story. So way back in the year 2011, I was out with some friends of mine and we got into a discussion and we began to realize that our bodies were changing. Meaning that you can't have beer and wings at midnight and then feel good about yourself the next morning. We also began to recognize that our metabolisms were slowing down and we were starting to look like our dads, which was a big problem. So around the table we go, and one guy says, if there was some sort of weight loss competition, I would annihilate all you guys. And if you ever hung out with boys before, well, then things just started to escalate from there. So by the end of the evening, there's money on the table and a challenge had been set, 40 days. Who can lose the most weight, the greatest percentage of body fat, and who can lose the most inches from around their waistline. So it was on. The day of the big weigh-in began, the first weigh-in, and all of us cheated. I drank 4 liters of water before that weigh-in because I wanted some extra weight to shed. So we all got on the scale, we're all looking pretty dumpy, and the next morning, we start the training. And I recognized quickly then, working out at the gym isn't the hard part. The hard part is getting out of bed when it's still dark and motivating, disciplining yourself to actually get out there. The hard part is when you sit down for dinner and your family's having whatever they want and you have a little piece of white fish and 1 cup of rice and some raw veggies and you're like, oh, this is cool once, but I really want a cheeseburger. Like it's a greasy one that makes your plate all wet. That's what I want. So you're disciplining yourself this whole way. So as the competition went on, we could tell that for some of our friends, they're working out. There was changes already happening to their bodies. And then there was a couple of other guys where you could tell that it either wasn't working or they weren't working. And the trash talk escalated. In fact, one of my buddies actually weighed more at the end of the competition than at the beginning. But that's a totally different story. And there's one guy in particular, my buddy Rob. And we are just giving him the gears because he looks gross. He'd let his beard come out and he obviously wasn't taking care of himself. He was walking all weird, so he got so much lip from us. But later on, we learned that Rob had been secretly working out this whole time. The rest of us are walking around like this, talking about how awesome we are and how much we haven't eaten. And he was just quiet. In fact, he went so far, he let his beard grow out. He would wear extra layers of clothing to look a bit bigger. And later we discovered that he would wrap a towel around his midsection every time we hung out so that he would look bigger. So the day finally came where we would do the last weigh-in and see who the champion was. Do you want to see my friend Rob, what he looked like on that last weigh-in? I'm going to show you a quick little video. Remember, this is from 2011, where phones were just beginning to take video, so it's a bit sketchy. But this is what we saw on that day.
That's good for me. Better. That's like 10 pounds off.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we know, Rob. We know you've been doing this. Well done.
Called it.
Anyone want to guess?
I'm going to say you could drop 20 pounds. Easy.
I hope you dropped at least 20 pounds.
Oh, wow, he's been working out, eh? Lovely.
I love the stomach flexes he's walking up to.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, Rob.
Muscular.
And there you have it. Rob was ripped to the point that he did what those MMA fighters do, like in the bathtub, like the night before, like draining his body of like any extra fluids. So he is jacked. And that competition ended on May the 1st, 2011. And every subsequent May the 1st, everybody who was in that competition gets an email. And attached to that email is that very video. And in the subject line it reads, "Lest we forget." Because Rob wants us to remember what perseverance looks like, what discipline and what the payoff can actually be. And it's this "lest we forget" reminder that we're getting from Hebrews 12 here. It's saying, hey, keep going, keep pushing, you've got this. Will it be hard? Yes. Will there be times where you don't feel like going on? Yes. Will there be times where children try to take the stage from you? Yes, there will be. There will be setbacks. There will be trash talk. You will get tired and wonder if this is even worth it. And yes, the discipline, education, and training will push people so far right to their limit that they can get discouraged to the point where they just want to tap out and say, forget about it, I'm done. And I can't help but wonder if some of you are in that exact place here this morning. That maybe the troubles, the training in your life have been so overwhelming, so exhausting, and maybe you've made so many mistakes along the way, you're thinking, is it even worth it for me to keep going on? If you're in that space today, I got something to say to you, and I want to set it up with this video real quick. One more video. This is a video from the 2017 NHL playoffs. It's the Predators against the Blackhawks. The Preds sweep the series 4-0. In net for the Blackhawks is a guy named Crawford. A goal has just been scored on him, and someone in the stands is recording what the crowd is chanting. So I want you to do your best. Listen to what they're saying to this guy who just failed. Did he know he failed? Oh, yeah. Did he need that reminder from 20,000 people? Probably not. Sports is one thing, but life is another. But maybe you've heard similar things. That's one. Thank you, Crawford. May we have another. He shoots. He scores. Crawford. Crawford. You suck. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Do people generally know when they failed? Of course they do. And often does that failure leave you teetering between keeping on and giving up? It does. And I am certain that most of you have felt this very same thing. And when people are already discouraged, when they're already worn down, when they're on the edge of giving up, when one person comes forward and says, "You suck, it's all your fault, it's all your fault," it feels like 20,000 people are saying it. So then to you and I this morning, the reminder is this, that everybody you meet today is going through something. Everybody you know is carrying a piece of their own trouble. So take it easy. Go easy. The endurance that Hebrews is talking about here is for people who have been pushed to their absolute limits. And the race that Hebrews is talking about is not like a foot race where there's only one winner. No, because the race or the goal of faith is not a triumph over other participants. No, the goal is to encourage as many people as possible along the race and towards the finish line. Because it's the people who suck, Jesus said, that he came for and died for and are going to make it in the end. So the hard question for you and I here is this: are you an encourager or are you a discourager? When people hear your voice, do they hear, "Go, go, go, you got this"? Or do they hear, "You suck, it's all your fault"? And if you're someone who feels low and worn out, can you see that the trouble that you are facing right now is not punishment from God, but it is a training, it is a reminder to get your focus at the finish line where the champ, Jesus, already is. So the word to you this morning from Hebrews is this: buckle up, persevere, endure. And when you feel like tapping out, look to Jesus, because the payoff is coming and it's so worth it. Because while we were children, our parents did what seemed best to them, but God is doing what is best for us, training us to live God's holy best. At the time, discipline isn't much fun. It always feels like it's going against the grain. Later, of course, it pays off handsomely, for it's the well-trained who find themselves mature in their relationship with God. So no matter your experience, no matter your situation, with God, nothing is wasted. None of it is meaningless, and nobody is outside of God's redemptive reach. So then to you this morning I ask, what does God's big payoff look like for you, who does it involve? And what gets fixed and healed and put back together in the end? And while you're wading through this trouble in the meantime, can you look forward towards that day? Can you look towards the finish line? And can you remember that no matter how tough today is, that God's payoff will be worth it in the end? Friends, hear these words. Keep your eyes on the finish line. Look to Jesus and encourage as many other people as possible to do the same.